Hi, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Happy Friday.
Mike, how are you, Michael?
Doing really well. Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Very good. Thank you. And looking
Good.
forward to today's open class.
Yeah.
We have, I think it's like 5 messages, but they're all, I think we can get through all of them today, definitely. I have some kind of little announcements, but I think we'll bake them in. So let's just go here and look at some questions. Let's share my screen. Chrome tab, open class. Here we go. So let's read this. This is actually not a question. This is just a nice message from Pat. Let's read this. Hi, Daniel and Michael. I do not have any question, but wanted to tell you both that my sleep has improved in these last couple of weeks due to what I heard you both saying about acknowledging your worrisome thoughts about sleep and telling your brain that you hear it and heed the warning, but you're fine. I cannot believe how much that has helped. Daniel made an analogy about trying to warn someone about an oncoming train. Also, you both talked about befriending wakefulness and finding things that you enjoy while awake. One of those things he mentioned was to take a visual journey. Think of a beautiful scenery or a trip you've taken. Well, when I would wake, I would think about it and narrate in my head a trip I've taken and go over lots of details. Before I knew it, fell back asleep. I didn't have to get out of bed, and that made me happy. So I just want to relate to you how helpful you've both been to me over these past months. Your insights are amazing. Thank you so much for answering my questions and for your expertise in this area. I really can't thank you enough. P.S. I forgot to mention in my last email that I've been thinking about sleep a lot less too because of what you both said about acknowledging your worrisome sleep thoughts and letting your brain know you're warned, but you're fine. Brilliant. Isn't this nice?
That's wonderful. I just love messages like that. It's just great. It's so inspiring to other people to hear that, and it's just wonderful.
It's super nice, and my kind of like one of my favorite things to comment or say when somebody shares something is that, you know, this is the gas that keeps the tank always full, right? It's like,
yeah, right.
It keeps you going always, you know.
Yeah, it really does.
And yeah, it sounds like she like you. I think I'm sure you shared the kind of the visual imagery, and we both talk about. But it's. I think I'm just want to just double down on what she said in the end there, which is it cannot be repeated more like enough times. Which is that when she had these worrisome thoughts, these anxiety-producing thoughts, she just said, listened to them, didn't try to make them go away. And that led to her thinking less about sleep. It's very paradoxical, but that is so important.
It is. You have to address those and acknowledge them. So you teach yourself, you teach your mind that you know that these thoughts exist and you're addressing them. You're acknowledging them. That's so important. It's so important.
And I think I'm purposely kind of talking about this because the next message we're going to talk about, I think it will ring true for Kaci, who was actually my student in BedTyme and graduated a while back. Actually, let's read this. So this is from Kaci. I graduated from BedTyme around September. I've been doing wonderful! However, I have recently weaned off and discontinued Prestige, which is an antidepressant, due to being pregnant, and have had a couple of nights of insomnia. Could be a side effect. I'm trying to practice everything you have taught me and not worry about it, but I was wondering if I could just get a couple of words of encouragement to prevent me from fully relapsing with insomnia. I would appreciate any assistance. And at that point, I said I would reply here, and I also sent a link to a video which was very similar to her situation. And then Kaci said, thank you for sending me this. Definitely served as a reminder to me about a couple of important points when accepting insomnia. And I feel like I have identified some non-helpful behaviors that I may be doing using Unisom, some recently, as I found this help with nausea and pregnancy, but also knowing that it could help with sleep. For example, it was taking me a while to fall asleep Monday, so I got up and took a Unisom, then took one last night, not to help with nausea, but to help sleep. Still had a hard time falling asleep. This is when the hyperarousal anxiety crept in. I know I should not get up and take a sleep aid if I'm having a hard time falling asleep and need to refrain from doing that. 2 questions though. Number 1, have you heard others having insomnia return when they have a stop an antidepressant? Number 2, how do you accept and not fight anxiety hyperarousal? I'm having a hard time knowing how to do this. Thank you in advance. So I can start here and say that firstly, I want to say actually this, that at the time, Kaci, at the time you were my client at BedTyme, my kind of graduation speech was something to the effect of this, that, you know, you learned that when you pay a lot of attention to sleep, then you get into a tricky spot. So when you have trouble sleeping, just kind of like, don't pay attention, just kind of shrug it off and don't pay any attention. And what I failed to do at that point in my, you know, in my path here was that I saw that just not paying attention is really helpful, but that helps really when your thoughts are not very sticky. When you kind of like, you have a little trouble sleeping, you kind of dismiss it, you're good, perfect. But when things become a little stickier, then you can't really dismiss it. Then you have to go the other direction, which is kind of like exactly what Pat talked about here. So if someone is in Kaci's spot, you graduated, let's say BedTyme or whatever it is, you've done better for some reason, and then you start having more trouble sleeping, then you can sort of just dismiss it initially. You can be like, this is just a one-off night and whatever. But when it becomes a little sticky, then it's better to go in the complete opposite direction of just like, listen to the warning thoughts. And actually, you know, the more willing you are to be like, okay, I may have trouble sleeping again tonight. I may have trouble sleeping again for 2 nights or 3 nights. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to experience things like that. That is really what helps. So my new graduation speak talks much more about that. So I just want to start there. And second thing I want to say is that, Kaci, you have this, I can tell that, you know, you have a lot of understanding, which is so amazing. Kaci, not only like, she identified that she was taking a Unisom for nausea, but she realized that at some part of her mind, there was probably something saying this could also help with sleep. She identified this kind of sneaky little sleep effort, knows that it's not helpful, and taking steps away from it. That is amazing, because, you know, something I've recently started saying is like, when you're not on your way into the rabbit hole, you're on your way away from it. It's like, if you're not going to the rabbit hole, you're going away from it. That is amazing. Mm-hmm. That's super helpful. So now the 2 questions are, have you seen someone starting having trouble sleeping, insomnia, when they came off an antidepressant? Absolutely. And I've also had people starting to have trouble sleeping again when they went back on one, or when they stopped another medication, or when they went traveling, or when they become pregnant, or when they, you know, my point here is that anything can be that thing that kind of worries you about insomnia again. And coming off an antidepressant, in my opinion, is really no different from anything else. So there's nothing special or there's nothing special about that. You know, it's just another kind of little trigger, little reminder of that you had trouble sleeping in the past, and now you're thinking about it anymore. And the thinking about it is what can cause trouble sleeping, not the fact that you came off an antidepressant. And so when you know this, that alone, I think, is super helpful. And then again, sort of going back to the same thing again, when it comes to the last question, how do I address that anxiety or that hyperarousal that comes? What can I do about that? Well, the thing is, in the moment where you're anxious or hyperaroused, you know, the most important is, do not, for the life of you, try to push it away. Do not try to get away from it. Do not try to like make it go away. That's what makes it sticky. So when you experience it in the moment, that's when you listen. You're like, I'm willing to be with this. I'm listening to my thoughts, and you will see that will be helpful in that moment. But something more practical that you can do over time is actually doing that. If you think this will be helpful, Kaci, doing like a daily thought download, just a few minutes, 5-10 minutes every day, write down those thoughts everything that worries you about, just write it down. And I think that you just do that without any particular intent, just showing the brain that you're listening, showing the brain that you because last thing here, Michael, and everyone else, what Pat talked about, my brain train analogy, is that basically when you have anxiety producing thoughts, it's the brain's trying to warn you about something. And the more you trying to like not listen, the stronger the warning becomes. So that thought download, if you just write down things every day, it's just to show the brain that I'm listening to what you're trying to warn me about. And when you're listening, it has no reason to warn you. That's the end of my little spiel there. But Michael, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the thought download thing, it's like my approach to the thought download has changed over the last few years. And yeah, just a simple acknowledgement. I would just maybe add, like, if there's something so completely obvious that is disrupting your sleep, like the neighbor does this super loud thing every night at 3 a.m, and it's a practical, simple thing, and that wakes you up every night. Okay, try to do something about that. But when you're talking about thoughts that are anxiety thoughts about sleep and worry, write them down. That's all you're doing. You're just documenting. You're just acknowledging. You're not acting on them. You're just writing them down. And then I like the idea that they're kind of tangible at that point. They're on paper. They're in front of you, and you can. And it's like, you know, when worries are in your mind, they swirl around. They're like amorphous, right? There's no. They just kind of keep coming and going. When you write them down, it kind of it just settles everything down and puts it in an organized way in front of you on paper, so that you can then see the words. And I think that's like a really important part of it, to help your brain understand that you are listening. You now can see the actual words. I think that's part of why it can be really helpful. And yeah, you're just letting your brain know that you're there, you're listening, you're aware. And that's the thing. That's what you do, because you're trying to change your thinking, and changing thinking is, you know, it takes these sort of like not super tangible things, not big. It's just like writing things down. That's a simple act. Just a few minutes. Don't spend your whole day doing this. Just a few minutes, and then you got it. And then that can start to lead to more change of thinking, which is ultimately what's required for your brain to not be threatened by wakefulness at night. That's why I think it's a really helpful thing to do during the day.
Well said. I think you said it really well. It's amorphous, but then there it is on paper. Like, it's very,
yeah. I think it's just, it puts it in a tangible form for you just to have. You know, it's because thoughts that when you talk to people who are really anxious, maybe general anxiety kind of things, it's like everything is just sort of swirling around. There's like, they're grasping for straws. They're you can tell it's just like it's this instability in their thinking. And then when you write things down, it becomes sort of more tangible. Yeah, it's more organized and tangible. And I think that's a helpful step. Little quick note on the Unisom thing. You know, Unisom is kind of funny because it's an antihistamine, but look at the name of it, Unisom. You know, it's like it implies that it makes you sleep. Unisom, you need Som or something. It's like there's a lot of slick marketing and all that. Ambien. I know we're getting off the rails here, but real quick, Ambien. Do you know where that name came from?
Like it's ambient. I don't know.
Well, it's Spanish. It's part Spanish, like AM, like morning. Okay, then bien means good. It stands for it means good morning. That's, you know, like there's a lot of like really subtle kind of slick things where the advertising got to be careful with that. You know, just you don't want to seed your confidence to a chemical when it comes to sleep, right? Your brain produces sleep. It's changing thinking that helps it become easier. You don't, you know, seeding your seeding your confidence to something is it can be a tricky path to kind of reverse that.
Neil chimes in, all part of accepting things as they are, be in peace with them. 100%. And thanks so much, Neil, again for coming on yesterday. It was a really powerful episode. A lot of good comments on it.
That was really good.
All right, let's take a look at our next couple of questions. And first, this made me smile actually. Judy said, "Hi, it's me again, Judy. Does sending questions here have a limit? It's my third email." Not at all, no limit. Thank you so much. Usually I go to bed around 7:30, read the Bible, then I will automatically feel sleepy. Is that a controlled behavior or not? Sometimes I wake up at 4 a.m. or 4:30. Since I have to go to work at 7:30, I do not have problems falling asleep at that time. But my problem is when I reach 9 p.m. and still working, I find it hard to sleep and my hyper arousal starts to beat me. What should I do? So at 9 p.m., I'm still working. I find it hard to sleep. Probably later on, when I'm still working until 9 p.m., I find it hard later on. So, okay. Yeah. So I'm guessing the questions here are, number one, you know, the habit of like reading the Bible, waiting to fall asleep. Is that something like, is that a sleep effort? Is that something she shouldn't do? And then we have the early arousal and then kind of getting worked up in the evening, kind of like those comments. So yeah, Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, I talked about this earlier in the week, how a sleep effort, anything can become a sleep effort, but everything doesn't have to be a sleep effort. So the question this is Judy. The question is, do you read because you enjoy it? Because you just like the experience? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If you're wondering if it's a sleep effort, you have to ask yourself that question. What is my intent? Why do I do this? Do I do this because in the back of my mind, there's this little voice saying, well, you have to do this to sleep. There's nothing else you could do that will make you sleep except this. This is the only thing that has a chance. If you're hearing that voice, it's an effort. So you have to be really honest with yourself, and then you can answer the question yourself, is if it's an effort. As far as the hyperarousal, I was a little confused, Judy, with your email, because you were talking about like reading and then 9 p.m. working, and I wasn't sure what was going on there. But I just think, in a practical sense, if you're working and that's not necessarily enjoyable, maybe it makes you stressed a little bit if you're working. I would think you wouldn't want to necessarily do that late into the night. That's not, it's like the opposite of a sleep effort. It's something that's just like making you kind of tense maybe, or frustrated with work. If it's work,
going into problem solving mode.
Yeah. So I loved hearing you're reading and you're just enjoying it. I was like, that's wonderful. That's just so wonderful. Because so many people have been told, like, well, don't read in bed, don't watch TV in bed, don't do anything in bed, just sleep. And it's kind of like those really strict instructions can be not helpful. So I love the fact that you're reading, and then, I can't remember the rest of the message, but like waking up after, you feel okay during the day, I think it sounded like. And it's that hyperarousal that can, once that starts to diminish, then, you see your true level of alertness and fatigue during the day when the hyperarousal starts to diminish. And it sounds like things are working pretty well for your schedule. Yeah, I think it's great.
I just quickly comment on that too. I think, to me, just reading this, it doesn't sound like reading the Bible at night is an effort at all. It seems like just something you do, and that's the thing you do, and that's perfect. And and the last thing, I just want to kind of double down on what you said, Michael, which is most of the time, our teaching is much of a like, don't avoid things because you think it will protect you from sleep. That's generally, I think, very sound. But it's one thing is true, and I think we've all experienced this, is that if I came home from work after like a shift and I came home at like 10 p.m., I'm not going to sleep for a while, because you're just in that trouble, like problem solving, like you are in that mode. And so I think it makes sense for someone to say, I'm going to stop my active work maybe a little earlier. I don't think that's any effort or any problem with that. It's just right. Common sense, right?
Yeah. And I think Judy used the word automatic, I think, in the beginning. And I thought that was an interesting word that you used. Automatic. All natural sleep really is automatic. You have the personal assistant, you have, the natural sleep drive, it just builds it. It's just, it is automatic. I mean, natural sleep, artificial sleep, not. That's sedation and all kinds of other chemical stuff. Natural sleep, it's kind of automatic. Like you are not doing anything specific, right? It's like, think of anything that's automatic. It just does its thing. Well, sleep is the same way. Sleep really is automatic.
It's automatic. Yeah, that's a good word. Ernest hops in and says, in your guys' opinion, do you think hyperarousal is purely cognitive? In fact, I think we've had almost this exact question sometime before. And I want to say that, in my opinion, I would say yes. In my opinion, it is a yes. I think that state of hyperarousal always comes from thoughts. Could there be some, like how much pasta you eat? Can that somehow affect like your levels of like adrenaline? Sure. I mean, a little bit, but hyperarousal, like to me, it always comes from thoughts. Absolutely. Yeah. But the sneaky thing, and last thing I want to say, is that it doesn't necessarily has to be like anxiety producing thoughts. Like hyperarousal can also come from you being curious or puzzled or like bewildered, things like that.
Yeah. Right? I think, sleep related, hyperarousal comes from worry and anxiety about being awake at night. But hyperarousal itself can manifest in a bunch of different ways. It can be caused, I mean, if you drank 5 cups of coffee right in a row, you'd be hyperarousal. You'd be like bouncing off the walls. And you might be, or, if you're really excited about something great that just happened, you won the lottery. Yeah, you're hyperarousal there. Okay. But when we're talking about hyperarousal associated with trouble sleeping, that starts off as a cognitive thing, but then it can manifest in different ways. People get like, they grind their teeth, they're tense, they get headaches, they get backaches, they get, all these other kind of somatic actually, things can kick in.
That was a great example there, Michael, which you said, like, if you drink a lot of Red Bull, you can have like palpitations and you feel like jittery and stuff like that. But to me, that may not necessarily be hyperarousal. I think of hyperarousal as something that is thought related, not necessarily just the body, right?
Oh yeah. I'm just kind of implying like the somatic kind of feelings, palpitations and all this kind of stuff can be caused, they're caused really by adrenaline. I mean, basically it's adrenaline, and that can be induced by your thinking, or it can be induced by a chemical, or that's kind of mainly it. So I don't know if I helped answer that question. It's an interesting question.
That was a great example, because it's that I think that went to the root of this question, actually, because I think that's what Ernest is asking about. Can hyperarousal come from something from the outside? And I say no, but I think you can have palpitations and like you can feel jittery, but I don't think that's hyperarousal. I think that's so. Short answer is I think yes, it's always part of it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Shankal says, I live at a monastery. Oh, and I was experiencing insomnia for 3 months now. I never had any problems with sleeping before, and I got rheumatoid arthritis. I started having anxiety a couple of days before. I was happily sleeping when all of a sudden, on 1st November, I went completely out. Was only sleeping about 8 to 10 hours a week. Yeah. I want to say that I've been sleeping in a monastery. Okay, I don't know how did it start before. I never had any problems with sleeping before get rheumatoid arthritis. So I think this sounds very sort of not uncommon at all, Shankal, like that there's something that triggers you to sleep a little, whether it is rheumatoid arthritis or something like that. But basically it's always like a little fear, it's fear of like, what's happening? Why am I not sleeping? Anybody can sleep nothing for a night or two, but it's only when we start being worried about not sleeping that it keeps going on. So I think, Shankal, that if you just like know that this is nothing unusual, something we hear about all the time, if you just spend some more time here, you'll do really well, Shankal.
Yeah, I agree.
And Edda says, please remind me what a sleep assistant is. I can do it, actually.
Sleep assistant, go for it.
Actually, I want to share like a quickly backstory about that one, which is I got this, like all good ideas, they come from a client. And this was a client who told me, like, imagine you have a personal assistant and you just like, you have all this work and you just like, give them, say, you take care of it. And they're like, I'll take care of it. And they're like, wow, that was nice. And then she said, sleep in a way is the same thing. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good analogy. So we all have kind of a personal sleep assistant, like in our brains, like like Coach Michael said, sleep is automatic. Like we all have a perfectly functioning sleep system. It takes care of itself, except when we try to mess with it. So basically it's like if you have an assistant and you're always double checking, you're hovering over them, you're over their neck, you're looking over the work, they can't do their job. They feel pressured. But when you kind of just delegate to the sleep assistant, which is kind of like that automatic sleep thing in your brain, you just delegate, you take care of it, I'm not going to interfere. The sleep assistant does its job really well.
Yeah, well said. It's like trying, it's automatic. It's trying, and you don't have to push a button, right? It's just, you just have to be awake. That's all. That's really all it is. That's sleep drive. Be awake. Be awake enough. And then that's it. And then you can let your assistant kind of delegate all the other things that happen.
Trust your assistant. It's hard sometimes. I know that. It takes a while before that trust builds up, but yes, when it happens, it happens. All right. Peter said, hello, I was just wondering if you have any discounts for your sleeping course, as I'm interested in joining, and the conversion rate from Canada is terrible. Oh yeah, this is what I was going to say, like maybe share some updates and stuff. Like we don't have any discounts, and but that said, we of course want to make sure that everyone, regardless of your how much money you have, can sleep really well. And that's why we do open classes and share all the information on the channel here. But in addition to that, what we're going to launch soon, I know I talked about it for a while, but it's going to happen soon, is these workshops where that's going to be like maybe $19 or something like that to join like a 2 or 4 hour, I don't know, some workshop. So I hope that will help, Peter. All right, Jake said, I wrote to you a few weeks ago regarding some concerns I had about sleep. Since listening to your advice, I'm now back to sleeping soundly for 9 to 11 hours a night. I think Jake is pretty young. Sometimes when I nap in the afternoon for an hour, I have extremely vivid dreams. I didn't would think you could go into REM sleep as soon as you go into sleep. Is this normal? What do you think?
Well, first is kind of like, if you're really deprived of sleep, you're going to go into REM sleep soon. And REM is when most of your dreams occur. But if you're just kind of taking a nap, it's really hard to know how long it takes to go into that REM dreaming state. That people are notoriously kind of bad at perceiving that. We're just, our human brains don't, even during dreams, it's kind of interesting. Like sometimes it feels like you're dreaming for like so long, and then you realize you were only sleeping for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like that perception of time at night. I just encourage people, just don't even try to perceive the duration of anything at night, because you're probably going to be off. You're probably going to be wrong. And it can lead to more anxiety about sleep if you're trying to it can kind of lead into that control kind of thing. But, going into REM dreaming right away, if you're younger and you're kind of sleep deprived, yeah, it can happen. You can go in fairly, 5, 10, 15 minutes. That can happen, of course. But it's hard to really know, I guess.
And also, I want to say that it is true. Okay, here's the cool thing with dreams is that how do you even know if someone is dreaming or not? There's only one way to know, and that is dream recall. That is waking the person up and asking, were you dreaming? And we do have more dream recall from REM sleep, but who knows how much we actually dream in every state. But most importantly, I think, is vivid dreams to me is actually often not has anything to do with REM sleep. It's more that when you are a little bit hyper aroused again, then you often have vivid dreams. So vivid dreams to me is almost always just because of a little bit of anxiety, which, by the way, you had trouble sleeping in the past. Maybe you have a little bit of that hyperarousal going on with sleep, and that could cause vivid dreams. Nothing strange or unusual about this.
Yeah, dreams, they're just weird. They're just really weird. And the more you try to understand them, the weirder they get. The weirder they get, the more out there you get. And I just don't even go down that road. There's a few little facts, and we'll just leave it at that.
Shankarl says, can sleep problems lead to weight loss? I've been experiencing a lot of weight loss in the last few months. I'm about 118 pounds now. I want to say to everyone that tunes in, nothing here is medical advice, but to my knowledge, short sleep in itself does not cause or has been shown to cause weight loss. However, a lot of people that have insomnia lose a lot of weight, which typically is because of the anxiety that when you're anxious, you're scared, you're worried, you don't have much of an appetite. So the same thing that causes you to not sleep also causes you to not eat. That quite often happens. Yeah.
And I've seen people actually over the years kind of go either direction on that. And it's usually if someone has kind of like the classic insomnia, psychophysiologic insomnia, or it's worry driven, anxiety driven. Yeah, weight loss is probably a little more common than weight gain. But someone who is like willfully depriving themselves of sleep, maybe a work schedule or caregiving or something, it's not insomnia. They just don't sleep enough. It's like this other category, right? I found that they tend to eat more because they're looking for energy during the day. They don't have the hyper arousal that's kind of keeping them going during the day. It's like they're looking for energy, and they're like snacking constantly to try, like that sugar kind of helps try to keep them going and stuff. So that's just a little side note observation. It's not insomnia. It's just the other side of it.
Yeah, that's another point. And then now when you open this one up, I thought about actually how it's almost like how we react to stress is what determines it. So the typical, like if we stereotype, like the classic person with insomnia is somebody who's like very health conscious, driven, type A, kind of like, perfectionist, almost like that. That person often goes for control. Like, I have this discomfort, this stress, I want to control it. And as part of that control, we often kind of eat less, versus someone who, when they're stressed, they kind of go for like, I want to numb this with kind of eating. I don't want to experience this, so I eat more. So the same stress can lead both directions depending how you as a person respond to it, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's well said.
Right? Okay. What is your take on taking CBD? It has been helping, but it's not good to take in the long term. Very, very common question, this one. And I'll let you go first on this, Michael.
Well, I'm not really aware of like really great studies that show, like, with anything, nothing really shows like this makes you sleep great. Just do this. CBD is used for all kinds of things, right? Pain, all kinds of things. I'm not really that familiar with the long-term effects of it. Since it's not really, well, in some states, I guess it's more regulated than in other states or something. So, it's that, do you really know what you're taking kind of thing? And is it consistent? And I don't know, there just seems like a lot of variability there. I go to like the basics, which is you shouldn't cede your confidence in sleep to anything. And when people are talking about CBD, it's just like they're taking melatonin or anything else. It's like, to me, that's like a seeding of confidence, and that's a sign that the person is they're searching, right? They're searching for the thing, and you can't just say don't take that, but you have to kind of help them change their thinking so that they learn for themselves that doesn't produce sleep, that's not making them sleep, and that's a thought change that is a person has to kind of go down that journey with a coach there as a guide to get to that point where they realize that, oh, that wasn't making me sleep. That wasn't the thing. The thing was wakefulness. The thing was befriending wakefulness at night. It was, it was all these things that really help, get past insomnia. And I don't really understand. I don't really know the long-term effects of CBD specifically. I don't know. You might be more familiar, being the medical doctor.
Not really, but I guess from my general understanding, I think it's pretty harmless. Is what I think. But it's not harmless when it comes to your confidence, just like what Michael said. And I think the way I would just want to say this is that when people ask, should I do this? I have this kind of formula, which is if your intent with X is to make yourself sleep, you shouldn't do it. If the intent with X is just something you like to do, you should do it. So I think in your case, Shankal, it sounds like you're thinking of taking CBD so that you can sleep. That is the rabbit hole right there. That is the rabbit hole where you just find more and more things and you get more and more confused. So think about that for sure. All right. Lynn says, also, we are awake longer, so we get hungry more often. Well, maybe not hungry, but bored. And I can totally relate with this one. When you're awake at night, nothing going on, you often think about, like, maybe I should eat something, right? Totally happens.
Yeah.
And Shankal says, thank you. Anytime.
Thanks, Shankal.
Learn some more here, and you'll do great, Shankal. I'm very convinced of that. Okay, so I think this may be our last question from Jen, right? Let's see. Yeah, this is the last question. Okay. Hello, coaches. At what point does one finally just give in, and resort to medication? Number one, I tried CBT every part except the consistent wake time, fed my anxiety, and made my sleep worse. Befriend wakefulness. Sometimes you just can't force a relationship. By 2 or 3 a.m., we are no longer friends. I've tried going to bed with no expectations, still awake. A good night's sleep for me over the past 8 months is a 5-hour night. I'm lucky if I get that twice. My days are miserable and it's affecting every aspect of my life. My doctor keeps pushing medication, but I don't even like taking Tylenol. I've reached a low point. Thank you. Well, Jen, I'm very, very happy you're here. That to me signals that if you're even at your low point, you haven't given up hope. You're still talking, learning, willing to learn, etc. And the first thing that came to mind here was that, traditional CBTI, as we often talk about, there's some problems with it, which is that it's so focused on like kind of control, like do this and this will happen. But the one thing that I think often is helpful is actually the one thing that you didn't do, which is the consistent get out of bed about the same time every day, which is hard. And it's not necessarily also something you have to do. There's nothing you have to do when you completely kind of understand and you change your relationships. There's nothing you have to do. But a good starting point really is that, say like, I'm going to get up about this time every morning. And to me, it's not about like necessarily the circadian rhythm or building sleep or anything like that. To me, it's about like no longer chasing sleep. Because oftentimes when you sleep very little at night, you're like, then I'm going to sleep in. And then you're chasing sleep. You're trying to get it. You're teaching the brain that it has to chase it. You're teaching the brain that it's bad to be awake. It's good to sleep. Go after it. So having that, like, just I get up about the same time every morning. I just get up and start my day, even if I slept very little. That really gets you away from chasing sleep. So I think that can really help.
Yeah, and the question started with, at what point do I give up and take medications? I think, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that has to occur. There isn't a point. You want to educate yourself honestly on what is normal sleep. I think that's a big part of of moving past insomnia, is learning about normal sleep. That people, the adults don't sleep 8 hours. They wake up multiple times every night. These kinds of factual things about sleep can help you start the thinking that that's necessary to not struggle with your sleep. It's like understanding that it's not that you woke up at night, it's how did you react to waking up at night, which is a normal thing. It's normal to wake up. How you react to it, that's your choice. And so, this can start to lead to the change in thinking. Yeah, the morning, just try to keep it kind of stable. It's just sort of a helpful thing, so you're not chasing sleep. I think it's a great analogy. A lot of people say they start falling asleep as the sun's going up, right? It's kind of like this opposite thing. So then you're chasing sleep. Then you're sleeping into the morning. And what that I've found, I don't know if you found this over time, but a lot of people are really frustrated that they do that and then they sleep until, say, noon or 1 o'clock. And the biggest problem with that for them is that they're out of sync with other people. And they get frustrated. They want to have like the social, sleep at night, be awake during the day thing, so they can experience social things during the day. And if they sleep until 12 or 1, they've missed. And that itself, I think, drives a lot of like depressive thoughts and really a lot of negativity about themselves. And they put the blame on sleep, and that just drives everything. It just makes it worse. I don't know if you found that maybe with COVID it's gotten worse. I'm not sure, but it's that frustration when someone sleeps in late, that they're missing out, or their friends don't do that. Why do they? And it's like they maybe it's the missing out thing. That's the main driver, the biggest problem with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I've definitely found that a lot of people are frustrated because and again, it's that sort of like little judgment, like I'm different, something is wrong with me. Why can't I? That thinking there's something wrong with you is always at the core of the problems. But going back to that question, like it's a common question, like when do I finally resign and just take medication? There's a lot of things there that are important to talk about. Well, one is that as you learn from this channel, medications are by no means at all a solution to insomnia. Most of my clients, most of the people on this channel have been on medications and are sleeping no better. So that may sound kind of disappointing, but I think it's very helpful to know, because if you think that, okay, when do I finally give up? Just take medications and just sleep. Well, the thing is, if you could take a medication and then sleep well for the rest of your life, that would be great in a way, right? I mean, yeah. I would have no problem with that. I would just tell everyone, just take a medication, sleep great for the rest of your life. That's perfect. But that is not what happens, Right. It just becomes another thing you try, and it makes you feel safe for a while. It kind of sedated, you sleep well for a while, but then you haven't really dealt with the fear that's in there. The fear comes back, and now you're in a spot where you probably don't want to be, which is like, I can't sleep even if I'm taking this. And then you think there's something wrong with you because you're not even sleeping on the medication. Right. And now you're in a whole different, like there's more fear, more confusion. So I think that's really important to talk about. And also like, it is very different for someone that has absolutely no problem taking medication. But we can already tell, Jen, that you're conflicted about it. You really don't want to take a medication. For somebody who has no problem taking it, it becomes like taking vitamins. Like I take a vitamin, that's cool. I don't take it. Really doesn't affect them too much. But if somebody's like, I don't want to take this, but I still take it, you have that conflict, the conflict, like that creates so much friction. So it's another thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well said.
And I think there was a few more things. So I think going back to, so we talked about, like, I think it could be really helpful getting up at the same time and befriending wakefulness. Yeah, absolutely. You cannot force a relationship. And sometimes I think I go so far into like really do something you enjoy, watch some Netflix, but sometimes you're really tired and it's not nice at all to be awake. And I totally get that. So, but here's the thing. Anything you do that is not trying to make yourself sleep, is actually befriending wakefulness. Yeah. If you're up at night and you just lay in bed, think about something pleasant, read a book, like even if you're not enjoying it, as long as you're not trying to make yourself sleep, you are making it okay to be awake, which is super helpful. And then a very, very good practical tip here, I think, is by 2 or 3 a.m., we are no longer friends. How do you know it's 2 or 3 a.m., right? How do you know it's 2 or 3 a.m.? And I mean, you probably check the time, or you may be guessing, but I'm guessing that you're, still awake, still at least checking the time, which is very understandable. A lot of people do that, and that's because you want to have some sense of control, which is so natural when you don't have any control. But it is the desire for control that is keeping you in this loop. It's like the price of security is insecurity. It's like, so when you abandon that, when you no longer check the time, you don't know what time it is, you make your nights timeless, then that really helps. And I want to add one last thing, which is like, you feel miserable during the day. I really always like to point out that comes from the struggle, trying to figure it out, trying this. What if this helps? Should I do this? Should I take medications? And that struggle is what causes both insomnia and a lot of like that negative emotion, negative feeling,
right?
Like tired, fatigue, the emotional fatigue, So when
exactly
you're in the struggle, things get better.
Yeah, a lot of people who are struggling with their sleep feel like it is the sleep loss that is the primary thing that's making them fatigued during the day. And it's usually not the primary thing. It can play into it a little bit, but the primary thing is what you were just describing. It's the struggle, it's the worry, the anxiety, it's the fretting, it's the trying to figure it out. It's all of these things create fatigue and exhaustion. You can think of it, if you're anxious about anything and you're worried about something, it kind of like eats at you, right? It kind of like, it can make you feel so fatigued, not necessarily sleepy, because with insomnia, there's the hyperarousal component that prevents the sleepiness, but the fatigue can be really, really strong during the day. And it's born out of worry and anxiety about sleep itself, about being awake at night. That's what drives the fatigue primarily. There was another thing I was gonna say about the timeless thing. Yeah, it's absolutely the timeless night. I'm just, pretty convinced for 99.9% of the people that's the way to go. And I think if you set your alarm for morning, I think that's talk about another practical thing. If you set your alarm for morning, it just kind of gives you that audio so you don't have to look at anything. Because people say, I don't check the time at night. And I say, okay, how do you know when to get up? Well, when it's 6 o'clock. How do you know it's 6 o'clock? Well, I look at the clock. So it's like, it's sort of like, if you set the alarm and just forget it, set it and forget it, put it across the room. And it's just like this thing that makes a sound at a certain time to kind of let you know that it's around the time that you might want to get your day started. And then you just leave it at that. Then you don't have to do the checking the time thing. I think that's a practical way of establishing that timeless night.
Absolutely. I think that makes total sense. And let's see, Andrea B20. In winter, if you sleep late, there might not be so much daylight left, so that may add to depressive effects. I think it is true that, I mean, to some degree, like if it's darker outside, maybe we tend to be a little bit, light has some type of like alerting effect on us. But again, like I think like anything else, like we can be super happy if it's dark and be super sad when it's light out. So it plays some role, but it's how we respond to it, think about it, etc., is always the most important.
Yeah.
True. Okay. Very well. Well, I hope that made sense to everyone out there. Super nice talking, Michael. And
great questions, everybody. Thank you. All right. You guys have a great weekend.
Good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.